The last thing our little emoji friends here wanted us to do is clean up by removing the div from the page using div.remove. That's easy enough to do, but it may be a little bit harder to understand why this is necessary. So I wanted to demonstrate this for you by showing you what would happen if we had two of these tests. So I'll just copy and paste this. They're both passing and it's working just fine, but I want to show you what would happen if we have a console.log document.body inner HTML here at the top of both of these. So for that first one, we should expect it to be an empty string, but for the second one, whoops. And again, we're reminded that spelling is really important in programming, and this is inner HTML. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so for our first one, it is an empty string as we expected. For our second one, it actually contains the counter that we rendered in the first one. Now, this may not seem like a huge problem because our tests are passing, right? And it doesn't matter what order they run in or how many times they run, they're always going to pass because we're scoping everything down to the div. So they're like all these little React apps inside of this document body that are kind of isolated from each other, which works out okay in our case. But what if we were to change things and instead of query selector all on this div, we did document.body query selector all on that div? We'll do the same for this second test. So we save that, and now we're getting a test failing. And this is just one of so many examples where keeping your tests isolated will save you from problems. So the reason that this is happening is when we do document body query selector all, we're getting the decrement and increment from the previous render of our component. So we're getting the buttons for this one, and then we're getting the message for this one. And so because those two things are out of sync, we're getting a test failure. This leads to so much confusion, and this is why it's really, really important that you clean up after yourself at the end of every one of your tests. So here what we're going to do is just add a div.remove, and we'll come down here and do the same for this one. We'll save that, and now our document body is all cleaned up before we start rendering the next thing. To take things a step further, what happens if our test fails before we get a chance to remove? So if we were to expect the current count to be -1, for example. So that test is failing, but it's also triggering a failure of our second test. And it's triggering that failure because this throws an error, meaning this next line of code does not run. So that's a problem because we could spend all of our time in this test trying to figure out, wait, why is this failing? I don't understand why this is failing. Only to later realize that actually the failure of this test triggered the failure of this one. And so what we're going to do instead is we'll have a before each, and we'll make sure that our test environment is awesome. So document.body inner HTML equals an empty string. If we save that, then we're going to get a passing test for the one that's actually working. And then our other test is still failing, and we can go ahead and fix that up. But with this, we no longer need to do div.remove, and we can get rid of that right here as well. And we can save that. Sweet, so everything's working as we expect. This is failing because we have the assertion wrong, but now our document body inner HTML is all ready to go between each one of our tests. Now there's actually a little bit more we probably should do here with our React DOM to get React to unmount this component. But we're actually going to swap all of this with a better implementation of this boilerplate here pretty soon anyway. And I just wanted to make sure that you understood the importance of cleaning up your environment between each one of your tests so that your tests can run in total isolation of each other.